Hey, good morning, everybody. Peter Kyman here with the Kyman Real Estate Group at Keller Williams. It is Friday, but it is not 8:30. It's actually later than 8:30. The reason for it is this morning I had the opportunity to attend something called the inaugural Wake Forest Economic Business Development Forum, which was awesome, by the way, fantastic. If in your own town, whether it be here in North Carolina or somewhere around the country, if you don't get involved in your community and know what's going on, I would encourage you to do so. This morning's event was fantastic from the perspective of just getting to kind of know what's coming, what's happening, and why. It's usually the why part that I find most inspiring maybe, or informative, because if you know the why behind things, then it makes it a lot easier to process before you complain, if you are indeed going to complain. So for what it's worth, I would encourage you to get involved. I really enjoyed this morning's forum. We're not going to talk a lot about what I heard this morning today, but we will as I get a chance to kind of process and put together my thoughts on Wake Forest and the economic development that's happening or wants to happen here. At that point, we'll come back to you and talk about those things. So anyhow, I raise my Kyma cup, of course, to you this morning, and super excited to be here. It's Friday, and it is absolutely stunningly gorgeous out, guys. Today and tomorrow, mid-70s, nothing but blue sky. It's as though, for those of you that are Tar Heel fans, you'll love this. It's as though Dean Smith ordered the sky up himself. It is phenomenal out today, and very blessed and super excited to get out and enjoy this weekend. You see, my youngest son has a baseball tournament. We're going to be out in Snow Hill, so wish the boys from North Raleigh and Wake Forest good luck as they go to represent us in the eastern part of the state. And then my older son has a basketball tournament this weekend as well. He'll be in Durham somewhere this weekend playing basketball. So while he'll be indoors and it'll be 70 degrees, my younger son will be outside. It'll be about 77 and sunny, so super excited about that. But again, the Economic Development Forum this morning for the town of Wake Forest was phenomenal, and I cannot encourage you enough to get involved in your community just to be in the know. So I did it. I am going to admit it. I'm going to raise my right hand and admit it. I went to Wegmans. Yep, last Saturday after we did Coffee Talk last Friday, Saturday afternoon, we went down to Wegmans, and I don't know if you know this, but the average consumer spends 2 hours in a Wegmans. It is more than a grocery store, and it's not for everybody. I get that. I know there's a lot of naysayers out there. All you got to do is open up any of the community information pages to see people complaining about what's the big deal. It's a grocery store. Their prices aren't this. Guys, it's the experience. And for some people really enjoy and appreciate that. And for some people, they don't. They would rather just nuts and bolts go to the grocery store, get the two things they need, and get out. And I get that. But if you are into the experience portion of shopping, Wegmans is that. It is phenomenal. To that end, I did hear one statistic this morning that really resonates as to a part of the reason why someplace like Wegmans is so successful. That 48% of all money spent on food here in these United States of America, 48% spent in restaurants. Think about that for just a second. It's spent in restaurants. What's the fastest growing portion of the grocery store market, and why is Wegmans so much bigger than all these other grocery stores? Because of the prepared foods. It makes you feel like you're cooking, right? Because you're reheating or heating for the first time meals that have been prepared for you. But quite frankly, I thought that was a fascinating statistic that 48% of all dollars spent here in the United States, 48 cents on every dollar is spent at restaurants and not at grocery stores buying food to cook at home. We as Americans don't cook at home anymore. Just in general, we just don't. Part of that's lifestyle. We can get into a whole political debate about all of those things, but those are the numbers, and I thought that was interesting. So our trip to Wegmans, it was interesting. As we were walking in, there was these beautiful, beautiful, good medium to large size pumpkins. They were like $5 a piece, and they were all perfect. That perfect stem on them, all those kind of things. Everything was just perfect. Now, I will tell you that the traffic 1 week after opening was still pretty substantial. Parking was still a bit of a chore. Walking through the store without getting flat tired. For those of you that don't know what being flat tired is, that's when somebody rolls up on the back of one of your heels with their grocery cart or their feet. There's no getting around. So what we decided, we got in there, we looked to the right and saw all of the grocery aisles. Kraft and Procter & Gamble keep all of their products. And we just recognized that going up and down aisles probably was not going to be easy and be fun. So we decided to go straight down, look at the cheese, the bread, the delicatessen. We did skip the beer aisle this time, which I understand is super impressive, and I can't wait to go back and see that. But we went over and saw the meats and the seafood, which, by the way, if you're looking for seafood and or meat, selections look fantastic there. Somebody trying to call me now. Let me see who that is. That's Trey McDonald. So when you watch this later, Trey, you'll know that we're on live as you're trying to call me. So I'll catch you just a little bit. But then we went over into the prepared food section and over by their burger bar and their wing bar, all these things. It just really a neat experience. Now, we were not in there for the 2 hours. Again, the average consumer spends 2 hours in Wegmans. We weren't in there for 2 hours, but we were in there for a good little bit, just trying to get around. For those people that stayed calm and just understood that there was going to be a crowd, I think they enjoyed it. For those people who just expected it to be like an average Lowe's or a Food Lion experience, don't, because it's not going to be. It won't be not only experience-wise, but just the number of people. So, hey, what's up, Catamount? How are you, Susan? Good to see you. I love all the pictures of you up in Cullowhee, by the way. All right, so a couple of things. Like I said, I went to Wegmans for the first time here. I've been to Wegmans before, but first time here in the North Carolina store. One of the things I heard this morning when it comes to economies, do you realize that the state of North Carolina has the 24th largest economy in the world today? Think about that for a second. The economy of the state of North Carolina is the 24th largest in the world today. Is it important for you to vote in local elections for that reason? If that's not a good enough reason, I don't know what is. Countries fail because of elections. Our state is the 24th largest economy in the country today. Think about that for just a second. We're larger than Belgium, right? Belgium has beer. We've got money, right? Anyhow, so for what it's worth, as we get into our election seasons here in the next 18 months, guys, your local elections are just as important as the one that you're all arguing about on Facebook today. In terms of the last statistic I'll share with you from the forum this morning, I thought was interesting, that has nothing to do with Wake County or Wake Forest or the economic development, but I thought this was a really cool stat. You realize what the #1 holiday gift was purchased in 2018 and is on track to be the #1 holiday gift in 2019? No, they're not hoverboards. No, it's not some Tickle Me Elmo thing. It's none of those kind of things. Travel. Travel is the #1 gift given in terms of dollars spent in the United States for Christmas or holiday gifts. I thought that was really, really interesting. Anyhow, moving on from there, there's a big debate, not even a debate, there's a really good conversation going on in our world today. And as a father of a 15-year-old, this is one that resonates with me a little bit. So I grew up in a time where, when you went to college, your father might look at you and say, you should get into computers. And Dad had no idea what that actually meant, but, at that time they called them computer information systems, right? Writing code and all that stuff was on the horizon of becoming the tech industry, the tech boom that we experienced in the late 90s. Well, today, are you seeing it as often as I am, that people are not necessarily focused on the college education piece anymore? What we're hearing, and what I'm hearing from tradesmen and from builder friends and from other real estate agents, and what I'm seeing online and the conversations that we're all having, are getting into the trades, right? And what's interesting about that is I'm having a conversation with my youngest son right now who loves to talk about his future. It's my older son's future I worry about. It's my younger son that wants to talk about it. In that conversation, I mentioned that to him, and he's like, well, what are trades? So I explained to him, plumbers, electricians, guys that, the stonework masons, people like that, right? I find that fascinating that is, where the conversation has changed and gotten to. And then I think to myself, somebody like my younger son, who is just naturally more inclined to be a leader, and definitely is like his father, likes to have his opinion heard. I could see him combining the two. What about trades with an education so that you can not only make a lot of money, make a good income, support your family, your dreams, whatever those things are, but also own the business, make the decisions, and control your future. And it's a really interesting dynamic. It's a really interesting conversation happening in our world today, right? I keep hearing about nurses, anestheticians. Am I saying that right? Of course, physical therapists. These are all degree fields that we keep hearing are great degree fields to get into. If you're not getting into those, then what do you do? You just go get a basic business degree and go apply to a trade. And that's kind of what we're talking about a little bit here. I would love to know what you think. If you want to either post it here or contact me privately, I am open to this conversation. Not only as a businessman here in Wake County, but also as a father who gives a damn about my son's future and this conversation, I don't think is going away anytime soon. And I think it's fascinating. So for what it's worth, I would love, love, love to know exactly what you think about trades versus college education. I had another interesting conversation this morning. If you couldn't tell, this is very little about real estate this week. There's just so much happening. Oh my goodness. Thank you, Michael or Grayson, whichever one is correcting me, but thank you. If there was a way for you to log on right now and tell me how to pronounce that better, then I think you know what I meant anyhow. Man, it's so good to see you guys on here. That's awesome. We had another conversation this morning about with a good friend of mine, Chad Wingler, who's our lead buyer specialist on the team and great friend and fraternity brother. And Chad and I were just talking about the amount of money that we individually and other families are spending on athletics. As athletics continue to get squeezed out of schools, as recess continues to get squeezed out of schools and those kind of things, we've seen a migration. I'm not saying this is the only reason, but we've seen a migration of travel sports, right? A lot of kids are moving to travel sports. I think another big reason for that might be in these larger communities like we happen to live in that are growing is kids aren't on the same team with other kids if they're in rec leagues. And I think that is potentially a good thing, but also potentially a bad thing, right? So I grew up in a small town where I can still tell you all the teammates I played on with my Kiwanis Little League team. And I can tell you all my other friends what team they were on, what color they wore, right? And Carroll's was yellow and Plotkins was green and so on and so forth, right? And so, but we grew up and you were associated with your teammates. And to this day, some of my best relationships with friends come from those Little League days, or those soccer days, or those basketball days. We grew up with the same kids. Unless you're in high school sports, you're not on the same team. Most kids don't get the opportunity to play high school sports. A, there's not many opportunities, and B, or many spots for the number of kids we have, and B, most of the kids, including mine, probably aren't going to be good enough to play at a really high level. That doesn't mean they shouldn't be playing ball and still having fun and learning the value of being on a team, what your role should be, right? Because we're all on a team at different times in our lives, whether athletically or in the drama club or whatever it may be, we all play a role, whether it be at work or what have you. So that being said, we were talking about it, but then we got the conversation kind of flipped about from the benefits to the cost and the increasing cost of travel sports and the tens of thousands of dollars that we as families spend each year, right? Whether we're spending that on a private school education or you're spending it on travel sports or both or whatever it may be. And it's interesting how we spend our money today compared to how our parents spent their money and how their parents spent their money regarding their children and the role that our children play and how our lives are kind of wrapped around our children's lives. That being said, again, another interesting conversation. The world we live in today is different. I had a really good friend of mine tell me a few years ago when he has a son the same age as my oldest son, and we talk a lot about being dads. And in one of those conversations, he'd said to me, dude, get over it. They're not growing up in the same world you're growing up in. So the things that you expect from your son, I'm not talking at a foundational level, but some of the other things you're expecting from your son, it's a different world. Kids are tracked out these days, meaning that their time is spent going someplace, doing something. There's no free play time like it was when we were kids. And so what we have to expect from them has to also adapt and change a little bit. And I find that also a very interesting question. So you can see this morning, my mind is racing. I don't know if it's because the coffee's so good or what it is, but my mind is racing on all these different topics. All right, I give you all that. The last thing I want to ask you before I give you just my weekly tidbit of information regarding real estate is this, and this is more important for me at this point in time, is how do you stay organized? Calendar-wise and otherwise. So examples. I've got a great friend of mine, the Strands, and they have something called the Kitty Cat Calendar that sits on their fridge. They got 3 boys who play 18 sports, and they've got a huge family on both sides, and this, that, and the other. The Kitty Cat Calendar is their centerpiece of their family. It's how they operate. My wife loves a calendar on the side of the refrigerator as well. We don't have a cool nickname for it yet. We just call it Jen's Calendar. But how do you stay organized? So for me personally, I do 2 things. Right? I use a Google Calendar. Our whole team does. And that way I've got my calendar with me at all times. I love the idea of tech. However, I also use something called the Best Self Journal. And what this allows me to do, we just talked about this on our team this week, is I write down exactly where I'm going to be the next day, the night before. I take my Google Calendar and I transfer it to here with some to-dos and some other things. And so I kind of use both. And the reason I do that is so that I don't miss any appointments the next day. Because I may not think about the appointments until 8 o'clock the next morning if I'm using just my Google Calendar and not prepping for the day. writing it down helps me. But I'm curious, how do you stay organized? Do you guys use a family calendar? Is it something that's in the center of your house? How do you stay organized at work? Share those with me, whether it's on here or privately. I would love for you to let me know. Christina, good morning to you as well. Man, it's so great to see so many wonderful people here this morning. I'm so excited about that, and I'm sorry for coming to you late. So I'm going to give you a little piece of advice if you're buying a house. And I think this is really important, especially for first and second time home buyers, to get really excited and may not have the possessions yet or the things they think they need in their home. And I say think they need because I was one time a first time home buyer. So first of all, do you realize that the average price, or typically most people are trying to put down between 5 and 20% down on their home. But do you realize that 40% of the market puts down less than 10% on their home? We don't have a lot of free cash, right, available. A lot of first and second time home buyers are usually cash poor, credit high. And so when they come out and they start looking at buying houses and they're looking at their cash available to them, they're putting down less than 10%, in many cases 3 to 5%, right? What does that also mean? That also means that they're likely looking at leasing things, or not leasing, but putting on credit cards or getting loans for things like new cars, things like furniture, things like refrigerators, right? So what I'm going to encourage you to do, hey, what's up, Nick? Good to see you, but I'm glad you're here. What I'm going to encourage you to do is if you have somebody in your family or you yourself are a first or second time home buyer, lenders look at your percentage of debt to income ratio when they determine whether or not you can afford to buy a home in addition to your credit score. And so your debt to income ratio might be great today, and you might go under contract on buying a house. 45 days from now, when you close on that house, that debt to income ratio has got to substantially stay the same. And by that, I mean this. During the final week prior to closing, and I've experienced this with clients in the past, especially early in my career when I wasn't giving enough advice early in the stages of helping somebody buy a home. Don't go out and lease a new truck. Don't go out and buy a new car. Don't go out and buy that refrigerator and the washer and dryer and the furniture so that it's all there in the first hour that you move into your house. Trust me, you're going to be there for 4.8 years, right? Because that's the average time we live in our homes in Wake County. If you're going to be there 4.8 years, you got plenty of time to get that furniture in next week. You got plenty of time to go get that truck. But while you're under contract, do not risk not being able to close on the home because you couldn't wait to buy the refrigerator, the washer and dryer, whatever it may be. Make sure that you're checking with your lender first before making any substantial purchases during the process of closing. Anyhow, listen, that's all I've got this week. Again, I raise my cup of coffee and my Kaima cup to you. If you need a Kaima cup, let us know. We're continuing to send those out. I am a phone call away. Send me your thoughts and ideas on these questions today. Again, how do you stay organized? I would love to know that. And have you been to Wegmans, by the way? I'll see y'all next week.